We all have favourite singers, and I expressed mine to you and David Mann an hour or so ago. As recording artist, he ranks supreme. He was Matt Monro. Simon Frank Sinatra had two favourite singers. One was Tony Bennett, who'll be here next week. The other was Matt Monro.
Yeah.
Not surprised. Well, I'm just thrilled to say hello to Matt's daughter, Michelle. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, Philip.
It's just so nice to have you in Australia. I know you were very much younger when your dad used to come here, but did you ever come here previously with him?
No, this is my first trip, and it's so exciting because I'm trying to see as many places as he was there, you know?
Oh, of course, and you might be aware he was a very good pal of mine, and we had so many good times together over the years. I recall one occasion when Tony Hancock was appearing in Melbourne, and he was at the Dendy Theatre in Brighton, and Tony took ill. It was towards the end of his life, and at an hour's notice, Matt went and filled in for him at the Dendy Theatre and did a full 2-hour show.
But you don't maybe know the end of that story, because it's actually in my book. I don't know whether they told you, I've got a book out on Dad's life at the moment called The Singer's Singer.
Oh, we'll get around to that. Yeah.
And in there I talk about that story, and 3 nights after that, Daddy went sick, and Tony stepped in for him.
Oh, well, they were obviously very close chums back in England, were they?
Oh, yeah, very, very good friends. And they'd, been right from the early 60s together.
Yes. Did they ever flat together? Did they ever share accommodation?
No, I mean, they were on the show together they did a whole tour, and they loved each other's company because they had the same sense of humour.
Absolutely, and your dad's sense of humour was priceless. You'll be happy, Michelle. I bought my copy of The Singer's Singer at least 6 months ago and had it shipped over from England, so I'm ahead of the crowd here in that I have the book in front of me, and I mean, it's more than 600 pages thick. It must have taken you years and years to prepare.
It took me 5 years, but it makes a good book stop afterwards, for holding the door open. No, it was 5 years. I wanted to do a proper story because nobody's written one before, and I thought, there's no point writing a fairy tale, and I interviewed over 200 people to get the real lowdown on other people's views. It's no good writing it from a daughter's point of view.
Michelle, did you learn much about your father that you had no idea about through that?
The early years, I didn't realise how impoverished a background he came from. I also didn't realise that his mother went into a mental institution because she had a breakdown, because she was trying to bring up 5 children on her own. Dad's father had died when he was only 3. So I didn't really know very much about that. Dad didn't talk about it very much. I think it was a very sad time in his life.
Britain wouldn't have been much fun during the war, and perhaps with rationing, even grimmer after the war.
Absolutely. I mean, I know they moved several times because they kept getting bombed out and lost their possessions. He had shoes on with holes underneath, and they used to put plastic bags inside to try and keep the rain out. And you don't realise that when you grow up, just what sort of background they came from, and they worked very, very hard to earn their dues, climbed up that ladder. It was a long road.
But all that emotion is in his singing voice, isn't it?
It is. I mean, he really painted a great story, and a lot of the composers said he sang it as they wrote it.
Yeah. Michelle, when you were born, was he already a singer and established by then?
No, he had just on the brink. In fact, the day I was born, George Martin rang him, and he wanted him to do a demo for Peter Sellers, who was a very big comedian over there, who was doing an album called Songs for Singing Sellers, which was a spoof of Sinatra's album, Songs for Singing Lovers.
Yes.
And he wanted a voice that he could then copy, because Peter Sellers was a great artist of mimicry, but he couldn't do a singing voice. So he wanted someone to lay the track down that he could then copy and put on the album himself. And George called Dad in, to do the session. He wasn't very happy, you know, to be doing it for somebody else, but he did it. And Peter Sellers listened back to it and he said, I can't do that. We'll use it, but we'll give him a pseudonym. And the name they used was Fred Flange.
Oh,
Is that right?
Isn't that wonderful?
And about 3 weeks later, George Martin rang him and said, you know, do you want to sign? Do you want to make some music? And they certainly did. And, of course, that was before the Beatles came along.
Yes, good. Now, from my collection at home, I was thumbing through today 16 of Matt's albums and 25 CDs in my collection, and I think you will agree the song I chose tonight was so appropriate, These Precious Moments.
Absolutely, and that's a rewrite of the Warsaw Concerto, one of his favourite pieces of music.
Yeah, and now yours is the first book, and I'm talking about The Singer, and I must admit I haven't got through it all yet. It's the first book of my life that I've started at the back, and I'm working my way forward. The reason being the tributes that are paid to Matt by people like Tom Jones and Paul McCartney and Mel Torme, Henry Mancini, Harry Seacombe, Sinatra himself. I mean, they're just obituaries that would never be written about anyone else but a man of your father's caliber.
Yeah, well, he got the name The Singer because when he worked, other artists came to see him, and he simply was that. And so I thought it was a very apt name for the book. As you say, Sinatra cited him as being one of the three greatest singers in the world. Now, I assume Sinatra counted himself in there. We never found out who the third one was.
No. Obviously, he's thinking of himself, Tony Bennett, and Matt himself. Now, I just do encourage people to have a look at this book because you've put together not only some wonderful letters and transcripts, but the photos you have chosen are masterful.
Yes, well, it was very important to me. Most biographies have a few pages in the middle with, 10 photos, and I don't see the point of that. I wanted the photographs on the pages where the stories were. So I've got over 100 in there, and they do bring those stories to life.
Michelle, I've got to ask a question because I'm just a fraction younger than Philip, and I, all my life, knew of this song called Born Free because it appears in so many comedy shows and things. Whenever there's somebody running out into a field, they'll do it in slow motion and they'll use Born Free. Have you been surprised over the years just how many times that's cropped up when you've watched telly and not expected it to happen?
I mean, no one could foresee that because, in fact, it nearly didn't make the movie.
Really?
The producer didn't want it. He wanted a song about lions and cages, and anyway, the song stayed in by pure luck. Of course, it won the Oscar. But what happened around the world was that people started adopting it as a freedom song as well.
Yes.
And so it meant so many different things to different people. And became a massive hit globally, really, and I think that's one of the reasons that it was synonymous with him. Everybody expected him to sing it wherever he went.
Yes.
And didn't Don Black do some wonderful work for your dad?
Oh, he did, and John Barry, of course.
Of course, both of them collaborating. In fact, Simon has a fascinating story about Portrait of My Love. See if you can verify this for us.
Yeah,
Okay.
An interesting thing, in my time here working at 3AW, I produced the afternoon show for a guy named Ernie Sigley, who has been huge in television and radio over here for many years.
Oh, that was on his show, yes.
Oh, there you are, yes. So, now, apparently Ernie, at some stage, once said to Matt Monro that there's this beautiful instrumental piece and it would just be fabulous if there were lyrics written to it, and that song turned out to be Portrait of My Love.
Well, it was an Italian song, which was a piano, yes, it was a piano version, that won a San Remo Song Festival. And then it was brought over to England. George Martin actually asked for English lyrics for that. And another song which you might not know, when my dad did the Eurovision Song Contest in 1964, the song he entered with came second. But he heard another song which he really loved, an Austrian entry by Udo Jürgens, and it was called Warum na Warum, and he didn't come anywhere. And he asked Don Black to transcribe that to British lyrics, and the song was Walk Away.
Oh, yeah, what a hit. I've always loved to, on days like these, from the Italian Job. In fact, Matt sang so many title songs to so many movies, didn't he?
Well, I think that is what transpired him from being a British singer to a worldwide international singer, because the movie From Russia with Love, of course, from the Bond movie, was so cult. It went completely around the world. I mean, he even appeared in Japan, which was quite unique. And I remember when he did the film, they snuck into the cinema, and Dad was a great, thriller lover and loved Bond, and he went in, and they were sitting at the back, and the movie started, and the music wasn't there. Well, my mum was like apoplectic. Where is it? And of course, she couldn't. She was so cross for the whole film. She sat there, and then halfway through, there's a scene where James Bond is on a grass bank serenading a lady, and a little rowboat comes by, and you can hear on a transistor radio a few bars, and she's like, "Is that it?" Well, of course, she sat through it fuming, and at the end of the film, very unusually, they used the song there, and all was forgiven.
Oh, yeah, well, mothers are like that. Michelle, can you hang on a moment? I'd love to come back and continue our chat about your dad, Matt Monro.
Of course.
It's a company with Michelle Monro, daughter of Matt. And I guess, despite all his fame and fortune, Michelle, it wasn't always a bed of roses. Matt had his personal demons, didn't he?
Yes, he did. I mean, the thing is, in the old days as well, when you finished a show at 11 or 12 o'clock, there was nothing open, no restaurants, nothing. And so they would go to the back of the club and sit with the musicians and have a drink and enjoy themselves and kick back. And like you say, when Tony Hancock, Dave Allen or the like were in town, they'd all get together, play cards all night and have a drink. And it was a social outlet. But unfortunately, he'd been very ill as a little boy with infective hepatitis. He spent 2 years in hospital, but he was never told because he was only 2 years old. And, of course, he kept getting jaundice. And he was told, to give up drinking, which he paid no attention to. So, unfortunately, in times of extreme stress when his mother died, and Johnny Spence, of course, his beloved musical director, he turned to alcohol. And, yes, it was a fight for him.
And he was also a smoker, I recall.
He was, but in fact that had nothing to do with, he had the strongest lungs, and John Black used to say he's the only guy I know with 3 lungs.
How did he, how did the transformation come about and the name change from bus driver to Matt Monro superstar?
Well, a demo had been made in Scotland. They'd gone in a few musicians to mess about, and it was the first time Dad had heard his voice back, and he hated it. Absolutely didn't sound like he thought it would. He left the demo there, and the drummer took it, and somehow it got in the hands of Boogie Woogie's finest, Winifred Atwell. And she loved it and sent for Dad and became his mentor and introduced him to the record company she was with, which was Decca.
Yeah.
They didn't like the name, and so they chose Matt from the first journalist to ever write about Dad, Matt White.
Yeah.
And Monro came from Winifred's father's name, Monro Atwell.
Yeah.
And it was in a matter of minutes, because of course he was born Terry Parsons, which doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But you might like this, because everybody always spells our name wrong. And he used to say on stage, it's very simple, M-O-N-R-O. It's an anagram of moron.
He had a priceless sense of humour. Now, I understand, probably EMI or your own company, you've released a series of CDs and DVDs, haven't you, to coincide with the book, The Singer Singer?
Yes. Well, I mean, the Singer Singer was brought out a few years ago, but in fact we've remastered the whole album, and it's just superb. And the thing is that I don't want to keep bringing out the greatest or the best of when there's so much material hidden, really, in the archive. About 5 years ago, we brought out an album called The Rare Monro, which is 50 tracks of never-before-released material. Now, that doesn't mean to say you've never heard of them. New York, New York, Birth of the Blues, but you haven't heard Dad sing them. And we put that album out, and it won an award. And now, in June the 4th this year, we bring out the sequel to that called Matt Uncovered the Rare Monro. So we're very excited about that.
Oh,
Because,
I
you
look
know,
forward to that.
as good as the old ones are, it's always nice to bring new material, you know.
Yeah, now, let me ask you, Michelle, of all the songs your dad sang, which was his certain favourite?
Gosh, he had so many. One of his favourites was For Mama, which he did for his own mother.
Yeah.
And that was another Udo Jürgens song. And the first time he ever took me to the recording studio was at Air London. And I was only about 8 years old. And we went in, and it was madness in there. There was 30 musicians trying to tune up. There was wires. Everyone was paraphernalia. But when George Martin tapped his baton, it went completely silent in seconds. And Dad beckoned me over, held my hand, and sung Michelle. And that was the song that was actually cut and pressed, and it was one of our, obviously, you don't forget moments like that, and was one of his favourites as well.
How special is that? And
he did quite a few Beatles songs. In fact, I don't know whether you know, but he actually had the hit with Yesterday, because the Beatles weren't allowed to bring it out in England as a single, because for their contract specified that all 4 Beatles had to perform on each record, and they hadn't. It was a John Lennon song, and for that reason it wasn't released as a single, and Dad had the hit with it.
amazing. See, all these stories, all these secrets you'll discover in The Singer, The Life and Music of Matt Monro by Michelle Monro. Hopefully readily available at good bookshops around Australia, and also check out these CDs and DVDs. And I can't tell you what fun it's been to meet you over the phone, and look forward to meeting you in person.
Oh, how very kind of you to have me on. Thank you.
And welcome here for the very first time in your life. I hope it won't be the last time.
That shouldn't be.